Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today it's Memorial Day and I'm hoping to spend the day in the pool, thus the swimsuit on underneath this. It's kind of cloudy and rainy and I think it's going to be cloudy all day, but we may get some non-rain time. So fingers crossed. But I was going to make a dessert to have with our guests today. And we're going to be cooking from Rodney Scott's World of Barbecue, and we're going to be making Roscoe's Blueberry Cornmeal Poundcake. This is a pound cake that has cornmeal in it, so there's both flour and cornmeal, and you serve it kind of like a strawberry shortcake, but with macerated blueberries and whipped cream, and it sounds delicious, but you need a ton of blueberries. So got those washed and ready, but the first thing to do is put together the pound cake. So we're going to put together the dry ingredients in this large bowl, and I already have the cornmeal measured in here. And to this, I'm going to add flour. This is just all-purpose flour, sugar. In here we have some Diamond Crystal kosher salt, which he does say to use that, so the amounts are for that type of salt. If you have a denser salt, you'll want to use less than the recipe. We also have some baking soda and baking powder, so those are going to help it rise. And we're going to mix this up. I'm just going to use this whisk, and I'm doing the dry ingredients first, so that I can just use the same whisk on the wet ingredients. You can mix this as much as you want before you add the wet ingredients, but once you add the wet, we're going to be very careful about not mixing it too much. So I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to work on the wet ingredients. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to add to this bowl are my eggs, because I'm going to get them broken up a little bit before I add anything to them, just because I always feel like I'm chasing the yolks around when I have a bunch of milk in the bowl with it. There we go. Now I'm going to add in my vanilla. Quite a lot of vanilla extract. I hope I have enough. That's basically the end of my vanilla. And now I'm going to add buttermilk. There's a lot of buttermilk. And melted butter. This has been melted and cooled, and it is, does he say unsalted? Yes, he says unsalted butter, so that's what I used. So it's not going to curdle my eggs or anything, but it will kind of solidify in there if I don't get it mixed up. Yep, because the buttermilk was cold. So we have little bits of butter, but that's fine. And again, we can mix this up as much as we want until we add it to the dry ingredients. Now we're not going to use the whisk anymore. So I'm going to add the buttermilk mixture to the flour mixture, and we're going to stir it just until it sort of comes together. We don't want to overmix it at this point. but we do want it to mix. This seems like an awful lot of mixture for a 10-inch cast iron skillet, but that's what I have prepared because that's what the recipe calls for. That is good. Maybe a little lumpy, but that will be fine. We don't want to overmix. Okay, so apparently I've been thinking wrong my entire time of owning this. This is not a 12-inch skillet. This is a 10-inch skillet, and this must be an 8-inch skillet. So I'm gonna have to wash that one. And butter this one. A buttered 10-inch cast iron skillet that I always thought was a 12-inch. So now I'm going to put this into my skillet. This definitely wouldn't have fit in the other one. And spreading it out evenly. I mean, it went in pretty evenly all by itself, thankfully. And now we're going to sprinkle our blueberries that I have washed and put out here for to kind of get more of the water off of them and pick them over and try to make sure there are no yucky ones and no stems. So we're just going to scatter this on top. My oven is at 350 degrees. And we're going to bake it until a tester comes inserted into the center, like a toothpick, comes out clean. He says about 45 minutes. And then we're going to set it aside to cool. These will probably fall in and sort of hopefully make themselves, you know, distributed nicely throughout the whole thing. And there's a lot of berries here. Our cake is in the oven, and I have a bunch of blueberries here just in a container that I can put a lid on and put them in the refrigerator, which we won't do immediately, but we will do eventually. And we're gonna make some macerated blueberries. Now, I've never done this before because I just didn't think blueberries would really release their juices because of the skins. But we'll see what happens. Maybe it just takes longer than something like strawberries, which don't have those tough skins. So we're gonna start with some sugar. And then a pinch of salt. So I'm just gonna put a little in there. And then he says a lot of grated lemon zest, like there's a huge amount. I only have one good lemon that I can zest, so that's what we're gonna get. Whatever I can get off of here is what's going in. Got as much as I possibly could off that, and that'll have to do. And then we need some of its juice. Hopefully it has enough. Just about right. So I'm going to see how much that is. A little bit more, but since there's not as much of the zest in there, I'm going to call it good. And toss them together. So I'm going to go get my lid. And I'm just going to shake it up. Now this needs to sit out at room temperature for 2 hours, and then you can put it in the refrigerator, and he says it'll last for like 5 days. So 2 hours. There's one more thing we need to make, which we could make later, but I want to go ahead and make it now because I don't want to film later. So. Last ingredient, last component of this dish is a bourbon chantilly cream. So basically it's a whipped cream with a little bourbon. So I'm going to add some bourbon. I'm just using this Evan Williams small batch. Use whatever you like. This is what we generally keep on hand. It's a tiny bit. You can feed it to kids. It'll be fine in that large amount of heavy cream that's already in my bowl. And then we need some powdered sugar, which I'm almost out of, but that's okay. Mine is very lumpy, but this should, since it's all going to dissolve, should be fine. There we go. And now he does say to use a stand mixer for this with a whisk attachment. From personal experience, it takes a long time to whisk cream to a stiff peak stage with your hand, and you will hurt yourself. Your muscles will be sore. Medium speed, we're going to let this go. When it gets to about this stage, when you can start seeing the tracks left, I like to give it a little mix because it tends to keep some less whipped stuff on the edges. And I just want to try to keep that from happening as much as possible. Is a pretty fine line between stiff peaks and butter, so that's pretty stiff. I'm going to give it just a little bit more, just to again get the edges mixed in. I call that good. And what I'm going to do is, because we're not serving this immediately, I'm going to leave this in here just in case I have to re-whip it a little bit, in case it kind of deflates some, and see if I need to re-whip it when the time comes to serve. So I'm going to go try to find room in my refrigerator for this bowl. So all that's done. Our cake still has 20 minutes-ish left on its timer. We will show you what it looks like and let you know what we think in just a minute. My pound cake's been in the oven for an extra 10 minutes, so it's been 55 minutes at this point. It was not anywhere near done at 45. So we're gonna test it. It looks brown, so hopefully it will be done. Got a toothpick, which is barely long enough. It's got like one crumb. It's not very wet. We're going to call this done. So 55 minutes, not 45, but I think we're good. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make Roscoe's Blueberry Cornmeal Poundcake from Rodney Scott's World of Barbecue. We liked this recipe. It was good. Will it become a standard thing we make in my house? Probably not. It tasted like a sweet cornbread with blueberries in it, which is pretty much what it is. The macerated berries were pretty good. They do get some sort of liquid, you know, that the sugar draws out some of the juices of the blueberries. Not as quite as much as it does with strawberries, but it did, which I had never really tried before. with whole blueberries. The chantilly cream, I still have some in my refrigerator. Honestly, it's days later because we haven't finished all of it yet. And it has not sort of wept or separated like whipped cream sometimes does. So it was, I think, probably because it was a pretty stiff whipped cream. So you can certainly do that ahead of time, in my opinion. Also, I didn't put quite as much lemon zest in my macerated blueberries as it calls for in the recipe. There was plenty of lemon flavor. I would not really worry about making sure you get as much as what's in here. If you really, really, really like lemon, maybe, but it's fine with just the amount that I used, which was, as you saw, from one lemon, which will not give you that much. But anyway, that was fine. Yeah, we enjoyed it. If you're going to save it, I would put it in the refrigerator because I do know that cornbread, and especially with the blueberries in there, there'd be a little bit more moisture. It will be prone to mold. That happens a lot. If you keep it at room temperature covered up, I wouldn't do that. I would put it in the refrigerator because that's what I've done. Heat it up for just a few seconds in the microwave and it is just like it's fresh. In my opinion, it was good. So let me know what you think about this recipe if you have tried it in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed watching me make this, give me a thumbs up, share this with your friends, and come back and watch me make something else next week.